How can SEOs and content marketers leverage the power of public relations? How can you possibly do AdWords without keywords? And what are the latest happenings in the world of advanced technical SEO? All that and more in This Week in Organic, episode number 39, a pre-SMX Munich special.
This Week's in Organic, live from London on thisweekinorganic.com.
Broadcasting live on thisweekinorganic.com, you're watching an SMX Munich special of the weekly show that debates the ramifications of the latest SEO and content marketing news. Sign up to watch the next show live at thisweekinorganic.com. Hello and welcome, I'm David Bain, and each week I'll be joined by some knowledgeable, opinionated folks to discuss the latest happenings in anything that impacts organic traffic. And that certainly includes paid traffic this time. And as for you in the live audience, get involved. So tweet about what's being discussed using the hashtag TWiO, and I'll keep an eye on that to see what you're saying, and I'll try and incorporate that in part of the discussion. But let's find out more about today's guests, where they're from, and what they're going to be speaking about at SMX Munich. So starting off with Ari.
Hey guys, my name is Ari Nachmani from Kahina Digital Marketing. I'm going to be speaking about some sort of advanced technical SEO topics in Munich, particularly around e-commerce, index bloat, and a bunch of fun geeky stuff there. So looking forward to it.
Fun geeky stuff is, I'm sure, what we're all interested in. Also with us today is Bastian.
Yeah, that sounds pretty much like me. My name's Bastian. I run a company called Peak Ace. We're a German company, and SMX Munich is going to be quite fun, I guess. I have techie stuff as well. I'm going to be talking about indexation management, crawl budgets, and that kind of stuff. So also quite techie, I guess.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, Bastian. And the third person with us today is Brad.
Hey, I'm Brad Geddes from Analysis, and I'll be. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
You're looking confused. Okay. So, yes, I'm Brad from Analysis, and I'll be going through a lot of different paid stuff, from enterprise to keywordless ads, and leading off the show with a full-day workshop on AdWords.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brad. And also with us is Brent.
Hi, Brent Satoris. I'm from Pixel Road Designs, which is a design firm, and I'm also a part of Search Engine Journal, which is an online publication for search marketing. I'm going to be speaking about Reddit, and pretty much everything about Reddit. Just kind of what it's doing as far as growth, and kind of what people are missing out as far as opportunities, and why it should be important to people. And that's about it. And I don't do anything with that, so it's none of my company stuff. So I'm just actually going to talk about it because it's a passion.
Oh, that's a wonderful place to be. And also with us today is Owen.
Yeah, hi. I'm Owen Henn. I live in Galicia in the northwest of Spain, and I work for Ranking Check, a German online marketing agency. And I'll be talking about hreflang annotations at SMX next week. So I guess we'll be discussing that later. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm sure we will. Yeah, thanks for joining us on that. And last but not least is Martin.
Yes, hi there, guys. So this is Martin Birdman. I'm working for Stylight, which is a affiliate fashion platform based in Germany, in Munich. And what I will be presenting at the SMX is like how we have sort of merged SEO content and the PR angle, and how like everyone can easily introduce the best of both. So yeah, some case studies there, lessons we learned, mistakes we made, successes we had. So some very tangible stuff, hopefully.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, let's try and make this just an informal discussion. A bit of a debate. And so, if someone says something that maybe you'd like to add to, or maybe even disagree with, feel free to jump in and start shouting away. And I'm sure we can foster a bit of a debate here. But maybe if we just go back to Ari to begin with, because you were saying that you're focusing on a lot of the kind of geeky technical stuff. So, what kind of geeky technical stuff is catching your eye at the moment?
Well, it's interesting because I know Mike couldn't join, but I know that he's going to be speaking about pre-render, which a lot of people have seen, and I'm really excited not only to hear from him, but I'm speaking a bit about pre-rendering as well, more on the sort of how to deal with AJAX issues. So, Google has come out, I believe it was in October, and sort of deprecated their old recommendations around how to deal with AJAX, specifically around escaped fragments and HTML snapshots. And what I've found, at least in my experience with our clients, our sort of large enterprise e-commerce clients, is that Google is just not up to the task yet at properly rendering JavaScript and AJAX and sort of all of the popular frameworks that developers are really hot on right now, like Angular and so on. And so what we're seeing is that although they've stopped recommending it, this HTML snapshotting, sort of a legacy way to deal with AJAX, is still effective. And in the latest sort of core ranking update, we saw huge gains. I don't know if they're correlated or not, but across several sites that are using this technology. So I think that there are a lot of brands out there that are trying to be ahead of the curve from a technology standpoint and are really trying to implement the latest and greatest sort of JavaScript frameworks and so on. But from an SEO perspective, Google is really still catching up. As much as they've made gains, they're really still catching up. And so that's kind of what I'm going to be exploring in my talk, alongside how to sort of deal with other large-scale e-commerce-related SEO hangups. So that's,
and what percentage of sites are we talking about here? I mean, is it a significant chunk of sites that are using this kind of technology that you've been talking about here, and Google are struggling to actually really, I guess, go through the
and I think that because the sort of development world, the web dev world, moves so quickly, and new sort of technology gets implemented very, very quickly. I mean, they've always struggled to sort of keep up, right? But particularly the amount of computing power necessary to render all of that JavaScript, and for Googlebot now to sort of decide, or whatever the algorithms behind it are, to decide whether or not they're going to truly render everything or not, or if there's one new element in your code that they get stuck on. It's a huge challenge, and honestly, I think that people are taking SEOs or developers are taking Google at their word, and they're just not there yet. I mean, John Mueller just recently, well, 2 months back, had said on a Webmaster Help Hangout, had said that, yeah, we're really struggling with some of this stuff, so you best make sure that if you can't figure out why it's happening, just go with the HTML snapshot. And so I just find that very telling. And obviously, you can't trust everything that comes out of one person from Google's mouth. But
what's the ramifications of running, say, both of them at the same time? Can you do something to where you're not putting yourself backwards, and then they do figure it out, and all of a sudden you're behind?
Yeah, no, and I think, so one of the solutions is something called prerender.io. I don't know if you guys can check that out. And this is actually a service. You can do this yourself, but if if the developers aren't going to take the time to basically pre-render and store a different version of the page and serve it to the engines, which is, again, is the sort of HTML snapshot I've been talking about. This service will basically render all of your JavaScript pages like HTML, like raw HTML, and serve it in its stead, and it's very easy to install. So I think we're going to see a lot of services or simple software sort of solve. But again, we're still serving, we're not letting Google render the JavaScript in this case, right? So just imagine an e-commerce site, and you've got faceted navigation, and you've got endless scrolling, or you have a single page app, right, where the URLs don't change and you're clicking around and it's really great for users. While that's wonderful for user experience, Google still can't figure it out, right? Or they know how, but maybe it's a computing power issue. So long story short, go ahead.
Do you see them kind of focusing more on the AMP kind of direction, and instead of really solving this, just kind of driving their desired direction anyway?
I think for content sites, sure, right? And I think that from a JavaScript perspective, there's no reason why and I just read another article about this. Like, you don't always need the latest and greatest, tech from a development standpoint, like the latest and greatest frameworks, because the developers are really excited about using it. And especially just for sort of content sites or publishers, I think right, that's the direction that they may go in. There's a whole other conversation around AMP and the sort of Facebook articles and so on. But from an e-commerce perspective, there is a lot of reason to use that kind of technology, or for sort of web app-heavy pages like single app pages. I think there is. So ultimately, I think Google is going to be playing catch up, or all the engines are going to be playing catch up in terms of rendering JavaScript and all the latest frameworks. And until then, I'm telling clients that they should really focus on what we know 100%, and that's, until now, the HTML snapshot still works and works well, even though they've deprecated the recommendations, but it still works. I don't know, Mike just joined, but maybe he has a, we've been talking about sort of rendering and JavaScript and all that geeky stuff. So.
Yeah, hi Mike. Thanks for joining us there.
Hey, sorry guys. It's really early on the West Coast.
Oh, right, okay, you're on the West Coast, are you? I thought you were on the East Coast. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I actually do have a lot of thoughts on, rendering JavaScript and such, because we have a lot of clients that we've done this for. And the problem with the snapshot is that sometimes when the cache expires and then you have to serve a new page, the time it takes to generate that new snapshot will make Google think it's an outage. So let's say it takes like 15 seconds to return it. They may think that's a 503, and then they'll pull that page out of the index. So we've seen that happen a lot, and what we've done is actually just removed pre-render altogether, and the pages still get indexed just fine. So the main takeaway there is that pre-render is great because it speeds up the crawl, because they can use a different crawler to access that content, but you don't necessarily need it to get indexed. And when you think about it, I mean, we are SEOs, like we're optimizing it. So yes, using pre-render is faster, and that's the optimal situation, but you don't absolutely need it in order to get your stuff indexed.
Right, and I think that that's the key takeaway, is that you have to test. And I would only recommend using, again, the sort of old school method of doing that meta fragment tag and then having Google crawl the parametered version with escape fragment if you know that your stuff isn't getting indexed properly. That's why we've used it a lot on large e-commerce sites. And from a development perspective, instead of using like a third-party tool or service, we're just serving a dumbed-down HTML version of the same page. But that's for very specific contexts. I can see most of the time, and I think Adam Audette and his team did a test on sort of JavaScript crawling and so on. But for most cases, I think that it would get indexed fine by today's sort of Googlebot. But again, everybody has different experiences with it. It's interesting.
Let's get a few.
Okay.
Sorry, go for it, Mike.
No, what I was going to say was that my working theory is that essentially they have two Googlebots now, right? They have the standard text-based crawler, and then they also have the headless crawler. And what they do is they figure out, should this page be crawled headlessly? If it is, they put it in a queue, and then they come back and crawl it later. And so that's what you're seeing is because crawling headlessly is more computationally expensive. It takes longer. Even if you use Phantom.js yourself, it takes a lot longer to render a page in a browser than it does to just download the code that doesn't construct the full DOM and the CSS OM and all that. So, like I said, my working theory is that they don't always crawl with the headless browser. It's just that oftentimes, it takes them a lot longer to come back and crawl it with that.
Right.
I was just wanting to ask Bastian, actually, but Bastian, you're talking about how to optimize your crawl budget. So, I mean, how does the, let's say, conversation so far actually relate to what you're going to be talking about yourself?
First of all, I would say I kind of agree with Mike and that's also kind of confirmed with John Mueller, that they're actually doing kind of two crawlers, if you so will, which is quite interesting, because if that is true, that would also kind of, impact your crawl budget, right? Because you would have sites being crawled multiple times, which is probably not, the best thing in the world, depending on how large the sites are. Especially, if we're talking about millions of sites, then you don't want to delays, nor you don't want to, have recrawled stuff too often, because then you don't get your new stuff in there, right? So that's two kind of interesting aspects. However, I mean, generally, I think, and the other thing that Ari mentioned, I think is also interesting from a performance, point of view, like the pre-rendering thing. For me, I mean, yes, it is accessibility on one hand, but rather it just is so useful to pre-render and or prefetch, also from a DNS point of view, all the stuff that you need down the road, and to make the site just really, really fast, right? So it's not just one angle, I think, for all of those topics. It's probably multiple ones that where you have kind of positive and or negative impacts depending on how you look at it.
Brad, listening to this conversation, does this make you happy that you focus on paid?
Yes, right. I mean, it's interesting because we actually have a lot of SEOs as clients who are doing things like using dynamic search ads to crawl pages to understand what Google's reading for the keywords, or to test headlines for writing title tags. I mean, everything on a Google page is an ad. It's a matter of how you get rendered there, right? I mean, an ad is anything designed to have a user take some action. And so organic listings are ads for just different payment methods. So we actually see a lot of SEO teams and paid search teams work together now as opposed to even like 5 and 10 years ago.
Interesting. That actually makes me think of Martin, because Martin's going to be talking about how SEOs and content marketers should leverage the power of public relations, and that is tying back to advertising and how your brand is positioned. And perhaps a lot of SEOs now are guilty a little bit of actually just focusing on the technical sides and on keywords and site performance, and not so much on really maximizing click-through rates and how their brand is perceived online. Martin, would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail there. So the main thing is, of course, all the technical things definitely do in place. They're the number one key thing to do. But then most of the time, that's also what we saw with our internal teams. We focused so much on making sure that from a technical point of view, everything works. And then sort of, especially the content that we created and tried to promote was, it did not deserve and did not get the attention that we wanted to give. Then we started like adding actually one PR person to the team, and we just saw so many different changes. And I think that is one of the huge advantages that we can leverage on as SEOs, looking at where currently sort of advertising, old school advertising is. I'm not talking paid advertising, but just the standard advertising firms. If you see what kind of content they're producing, if they would know all of these SEO backgrounds and technical things, then they would be able to make a much bigger splash than they're currently doing. So I think there's huge opportunity for us in that field.
But I mean, realistically, will most SEOs be comfortable and able to do that kind of thing, or are we starting to see the SEO world really just splinter into different disciplines, and we can't realistically expect everyone to be able to do everything?
Yeah, no, totally. That was also something that we internally saw within the team. Like, okay, outreach. We created a campaign that's like, okay, we now need to outreach. We're going to send out mail blasts. And then talking to the PR girl, actually, that was already at the company. We're like, hey, you have all these contacts. Like, why don't we include you from day one on in all the content we produce, and it actually works together, so you can outreach better and get better results out of that. So, and there we've seen really tremendous results. And I first also was slightly worried that it would splinter. And also PR always sounds very like, oh no, you just take something, spin it, and try to make it sound nice. But we can really see good results there by introducing them from day one on.
Intriguing. So, I mean, Brad, you said that you obviously work with SEO clients as well. What aspects of SEO can you actually work with and actually tie into what you're doing with paid search as well?
Okay, so I'm not an SEO. When you talk pure render, my brain just like, I just tune out, right? I don't hear any of the conversation.
Me too.
Right, so I'm a marketer at heart, right? It doesn't matter how your ad shows up. If your organic ad shows up, if your Reddit blog post shows up, if whatever, it's all content designed to influence a user base, right? So, we see people who test ads to understand how to write headlines, right? We see other types of companies look at how do we use our ad data in our emails, because your email button is your click-through rate, right, information. And so all this stuff is completely interrelated. So it really is, how do you leverage one area to test and understand how users react, and then take that information into other aspects that you're doing, whether it's organic, email, social, whatnot, right? They're all still influencing users to take some sort of action or do some kind of activity. So marketing is marketing. It's the way it shows up is what the different tactics are.
And do you generally use Google Analytics to track the impact that different activities have on each other?
That depends on the size of the company and if they compete with Google or not. So like an Adobe or a Microsoft, no way. For most people, yes, right? So that really, a technology standpoint, all the analytics systems can do it. It's just a matter of where you want your data to sit, and do you have to have multiple stacks talking to each other.
Got you. So, I mean, who else is finding that they're getting more heavily involved actually with other marketing activities, and they're finding that they're being sucked away from traditional SEO into more thinking about integrated marketing?
We'll see. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's kind of something that happened to me 10 years ago. Like when I started getting into SEO, and I started, when I first got into social, it was link building. I realized that I could, with sites like Dig and Reddit, I could get deep-seated links into the content, and then all of a sudden I hit the front page, crushed my server, got like 10,000 links, and had a PR6 site after 30 days, and went, holy shit. There's something to this, and I stopped doing SEO and started focusing 100% on doing social, and kind of in that early stage. But one of the things that's kind of really driven me, and excites me the most right now is the transition in the way that people are integrating and using the internet. I think we got really excited with social media and a lot of the structural shifts as technology became essentially like a layer in our everyday marketing lives, right? It became less of a segment and became part of everything that we do, right? Our smartphones and everything like that. And so what I think is really cool and what I'm really following is the concept around like virtual reality and augmented reality. How much is that going to shift everything that we do, from design to content generation to interaction rates and click-throughs and purchase rates and everything, right? When people are virtually engaged, how does that shift everything we do? When you look at the AMP project, that really excites me, not because I give two craps about the way that they're trying to deliver faster content, but to me, it's interesting to watch how the companies are smart enough to know that the future is changing how you perceive your experience online. If they can set a standard where you feel like not having these extra things, not having the load time, not having a lot of the extra ads becomes what you're used to, then when you try to go back, you can't, right? It's like, who goes to a Yellow Pages and looks up a number these days, even though the number's still adequately there and easily categorized for you to find it. And so I think AMP is what they're trying to label it. I think they're trying to get away from the terminology AMP. Progressive web apps. I don't know if anybody follows Ilya Grigorik from Google, but he's been working on a lot of like future progressive web apps where you don't actually download the app. It caches everything and it makes calls and it allows you to like essentially have an offline app that connects whenever you have an internet. That's really exciting, and that's also where I kind of find a lot of my passion in Reddit, because I think a lot of people don't understand how much Reddit has shaped the cultural acceptance of web activity across the whole world through some of their things. So those are the things that I think I follow a lot right now, because it's societal change, right? It's taking technology and changing people's expectations for that technology.
So is Reddit particularly impactful for certain industries? I mean, is it like an underground type social system that some sections of people?
It's not really underground. That's, I think, the big misconception on Reddit is that it's like some small niche site. I mean, Reddit has like over 10,000 communities. They have a community for every single like city, every single culture, every single hobby. They have 20 communities for automotive, and they're doing 230 million uniques a month. And they're growing. They're, in the U.S., it's more significant than anywhere else. That's where they've really grown. And with 62% of the audience being U.S. based, they get 145-ish million uniques a month, which is 1/3 of the U.S. population, right? So it's pretty significant. But more importantly, if you look at the stuff like SOPA, you know, a lot of the censorship issues, a lot of that got strength and was driven, you know, on Reddit. When you look at the concept of memes, which we all love so much, those started on Reddit. When you look at, you know, AMAs, the Ask Me Anythings, those were kind of founded there. So I think, you know, it's definitely a subculture from where it started, but you're talking about a site that's done absolutely zero marketing ever, never done a newsletter, never did anything until this year, and grew from virtually, you know, 2011 they had 13 million users, and 2016 they have 230, and they're gaining about 25% growth month over month. And now they took funding and started a growth team and started a newsletter and a podcast and documentaries and websites like Upvoted, and they're doing all their social channels, and they're getting into Instagram and all these other places. So they've done all that with nothing, and now they're actually going to make an effort. So I think that, you know, that's why I'm so excited about it, because I think that their growth potential is to get to 500 million, a billion users a month pretty easily over the next 2-3 years.
But is there a certain type of business that should treat Reddit more seriously? No.
Everything. I mean, you know, one thing I would say is the companies that need the difference between Reddit and other social sites is that when you're on like Facebook, right, your family and friends. Let's say you have your crazy uncle who says something totally racist and you don't believe that, but you don't typically take a stand and decide to start arguing with them on Facebook. You're just like, well, that's crazy, Eddie. Just ignore him, right? When people say things you don't like in family environments, you kind of ignore it. You might banter a little bit. For the most part, you're not looking to start an argument or really debate something. Same thing with Twitter. If you're looking at something in a Starbucks line, you're not going to really spend a lot of time, unless it's personal, very, very personal, you debate with your followers. You might debate with strangers, but you typically treat your followers a little different. Reddit doesn't have that social connectivity. They don't have a sense of like, I'm here to hang out with my family and friends. And so what you get is blunt honesty. And you get people who are there to learn, and they're there to interact. So when you go there as a company and you don't prepare, you don't research, and if you have skeletons, I think this is the big thing. Companies that go there and have like really big skeletons in their closet, like I think Wyclef went there recently and had a really big problem. If you have things that you've done, like you've broken the law, ripped people off, you know, you're a company that's kind of abusing, you know, human rights or you know, environmental issues, and you go there and you're not willing to discuss those things, then that can be dangerous. So who shouldn't be on Reddit? People who have something to hide and who aren't prepared to stand their ground.
And so just taking a straw poll here of you know, the 7 people who are on here, is anyone else that actively on Reddit and using it at the moment?
Little bit, not a huge amount, but Reddit happens to be, we get more referrals from Reddit than Facebook.
Wow.
And we don't try to actually do a lot on Reddit, but we couldn't ignore the numbers. So the numbers were so strong that we're like, okay, we have to go to Reddit somewhat. And so we spend some time on Reddit just because of it's better than Facebook for us.
Well, a front page on Reddit, like a front page, if you know, you have to understand there's a front page lurking audience, right? And then there's a front page like logged in. But if you can get into the top 50 categories on Reddit and hit the front page, you're going to see anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000 visits, you know, in a 24 to 48 hour time period. You know, it's a significant, you know, group of traffic. And again, a lot of people can kind of brush that off, but the thing is that you're not tricking them. There's no, you know, they're not in family mode. Well, they're legitimately interested in what they're coming to see.
And that's the difference. So I'm talking about like our little company, right? We're an ad testing software company. And our conversion rates from Reddit far outpace Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatnot, because someone mentions us in context of something interesting, and people aren't just reading, they're actually buying, becoming customers, where Facebook, your bounce rates are 97%, right? Twitter, it's higher sometimes. Reddit's not, and so it's a very different traffic source, and so we actually treat it very, very differently.
Yeah.
Intriguing. Okay, maybe moving back to SEO a little bit, actually. I'd like to hear a little bit from Owen, because I mean, you're going to be talking about things like hreflang and internationalization of web pages. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing at the moment in terms of bad implementation of that kind of thing?
Well, with hreflang annotations especially, I think the biggest challenge for most companies is getting them right technically. We see lots of companies implementing hreflang. I think it started a few years ago already, right? It's been around for a while, but We still get the feeling that most people struggle with the implementation or with just getting the concept right, getting the strategy right. So that's what I'll be talking about. I'll be talking about how to avoid the most common mistakes, how to get it right technically. But then one point I would also like to make during my talk is that it's not just about getting it right technically, but also you need a good foundation beneath it. So you need a good international domain strategy in order to get good international rankings. So yeah, that's what my talk's going to be about.
You know, it is kind of interesting that even as long as we've been talking about international SEO, it's still such a question mark, right? I mean, it's like when people go about it, there's still a handful of people in the world that you can talk to that have experience and the depth of really running an international campaign. And so I still find that so interesting that it's so valuable, especially today in today's world of connectivity, but yet it's still so under kind of matured.
And big brands screw it up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can see this, and I'm sure you've got plenty of examples of that. But whether it's how to redirect, whether you're redirecting users hard or not, based on their IP geolocation and their browser language, and storing cookies and hreflang, right? So there's a lot of complexities.
What do you think? You think it's because the industry? I mean, anybody can answer this, but you think it's the industry? Is that complicated, or is it the same kind of approach people did with everything that they don't really embrace 100%, where it's just kind of half-assed, like somebody's not really putting together a true full strategy of like, how am I going to do this from A to Z? And they're just like, all right, well, buy that domain and build an account there, and let's change some language on a page and publish something here. What's the real issue, with why it's so complicated?
I think it's with tools and with CMSs and things like that as well. Because I mean, recently, like say, I launched Authoritas.com, and I'm wondering, do I need a version for the US and the UK, because that's the two main target markets. But I want to do things like actually, if I was to have a site targeted at the US and another site targeted at the UK, I would probably also want to have a blog that was international English and not targeted, just in the one country. And then looking into that, there are challenges with getting comments set up. If I was to have kind of one comment section for all languages. So it's not that easy to set up, and I don't believe that the majority of CMSs or WordPress plugins, if you want to use that, will really cater towards delivering a combination thing that is able to actually do international English and English for different countries quite well.
And not confusing it at the same time. We were going to try to do some Spanish language content. We realized that you have to do a ton. You have to make sure that the ads are not in different languages, that the links are not in different languages, that the header, you really have to go into even how you define your content to Google, right? Say, hey, this is a UK site, don't treat it like a US site, to put all the code and the parameters and everything in place. And again, I'm not that technical, to be able to speak to all of it, but I realized from the conversations that it was a lot tougher to get right than it was to get the concept together.
Yeah, I think that's true. And also, I think it really gets even worse when you have a lot of mixed signals, right? So then it's one thing happening in the header, the other one is happening in the markup, and the last one is then that you get from external link sources that are from totally different geolocations, and then you're literally fucked, right? And that's the biggest problem really, because then, as you said, Brett, I mean, if there's no strategy in place that covers all of those aspects from the beginning onwards, then you really have a mess, and that takes oftentimes way longer to clean that up, oftentimes months and years, versus if you would have done it properly from the beginning onwards.
Or you may never know at all, right?
Yeah.
I think Bastian brings up a good point about headers, because most of our tools don't even look at headers for things like xrobots, hreflang, and rel canonical. So your page may not be indexed for a reason that your tool doesn't even know.
That's true. Totally agree.
And I see you nodding away there. I mean,
Yeah.
an example that I was talking about English-speaking sites. When I see the majority of big brands in our industry, something like a Moz.com, just going for English and not trying to actually deliver content for different countries like the UK separately. Is that generally the best strategy to go for if you just have an English site, do you think?
No, I wouldn't say so, but it's a pretty simple and easy strategy because like if you only have one version of your website that's in English, then you don't have any problems with internationalization really. Where it gets complicated is when you have several versions. So let's say you have an English US version, you have an English UK version, and then you have an English version for the rest of the world, and you might have a German version, a Spanish version, and a French version. And this is where it gets really complicated for search engines to crawl and index your pages correctly and to deliver the right results to the right users based on their language, based on their location and everything. So that's when you have to take care of things like hreflang annotations and getting your indexing right. And one thing Bastian said that's very important is the signals. You have to get your signals right. Most websites just send different signals at different in different places, and that's where search engines get confused and deliver the wrong results to users.
I think one of the added complexities nowadays is also like with kind of the new stuff, say like schema.org, for example, right? They kind of have the local markups and that kind of things. So then people are, we had a client that actually wanted to target the UK, but they had only a German residency or a German office. So they kind of put on schema markup to kind of mark up the like where they're sitting, the address, and that kind of stuff. That was really confusing apparently for engines. When they got rid of that, all of a sudden that page started ranking in the UK again. So that's like those weird kind of things with kind of new mixed signals, which I think makes it really complicated nowadays.
So basically, it's really important to get your concept and your strategy right, and then to get the technical implementation right. And if you make mistakes in one of those two areas, it's not going to work out for you. So what we also get a lot is clients coming to us and asking us to sort out their international SEO, sort out their hreflang annotations, and we just noticed that they should start a lot earlier. They should start with a good strategy, with a good domain strategy, with a good and versions of your website that make sense for your target audience, for your users. Choose the right languages, choose the right countries, choose the right domains, and then take care of the technical implementation.
Is it easier to fix or start over?
Depends on the situation. It is often a good idea to start with a good strategy. Start with a good domain strategy. And from my point of view, for most companies, a good domain strategy would be one generic top-level domain for the entire world, and then a good directory structure for different languages and countries, whatever you need. Some companies don't even need country directories. Some companies just need one version of their website for each language that's spoken in the world. Because it depends, if you don't have offices in a country or if you're not an online shop, if you operate globally, you don't really need country versions, right? You just need language versions. So in the end, the strategy is going to be very individual for every single company. But it is important to start with a good strategy. If you have a good strategy, the technical implementation actually isn't that tricky at all. Like hreflang, you read up how to do it and you do it. Basically.
Yeah, but sometimes developers really bungle it. That's, have you ever just gone the sitemap route? Just been like, you guys are screwing this up so bad. I don't know if people are still using that method, but have you done that when you just see that they keep messing it up and the engines are getting confused?
You mean implementing hreflang in sitemaps?
In the sitemap instead of
that's
like
actually,
we can control it,
Yeah, it's actually I think it's actually my favorite way of doing it because I think it's the cleanest and best way. But developers tend to prefer the header section one, like just including the
I guess the challenge is if you're hard coding it in the sitemap and something gets updated, then you have to if it's manually run. If it's automatically run, then if they can do it here and do it there, I guess it doesn't really matter. But I like the fact that you can come in and just be like, just erase everything in the head and let me put this in the sitemap for you.
Yeah.
Oh, and what's your preference for automatic redirection of users based upon IP?
My personal preference is don't do it, don't use it. It works perfectly in a country like Germany where there's one language. It works in the US. I lived in Belgium for a while, and it was a pain in the ass, really. I ended up on French version one day, on the Dutch version the next day, on the English version another day, and then the pages didn't even remember which version I had selected, so they didn't set a cookie or anything for my next visit. So I'm not a big fan of IP or browser language-based redirects. They do come in handy sometimes, but you should only do it if you do it right. And doing it right means doing it right for every user in the world.
As a frequent traveler who sometimes goes to sites, and I don't speak German, but I'm in Germany 3 or 4 times a year, when a site locks me into the language and won't even let me get to English, I can't do anything. And I spend money online. So if you're going to do it, at least let people easily switch languages or actually use your sites.
And I think that's the common sort of best practice now, is like serve an overlay and let the user decide, like empower the user. But there are all sorts of challenges. I mean, and Brent, you mentioned, why is this so hard? I mean, think about, we had a client that was Australia-based, but depending on where their user came, they had different fulfillment centers for where they were shipping the products. And so we had to sort of figure out not only the overlay of sort of language, but also which pathway that led them to the right cart that had the right, currency and so on, and which fulfillment center, because it was a huge challenge. So I think we just kind of give the instructions to the user on an overlay, whether it's a top box or at the top, and let them figure it out. Never mind the indexation issues that we have, because even if you're 302ing and not 301ing, even though it's temporary, we found that all of the non-US content was not getting indexed. Because
with like PayPal, one of the things that drives me nuts with PayPal is because my other half is Chinese and reads a lot of the Chinese-based sites. It will actually, just based on which site you're visiting, will actually, every time I log into PayPal, I'm on Chinese PayPal.
Probably
so I can go through and delete it and put EN and then log in, and then it's fine. But every single time I open it, it's Chinese.
Yeah, check your browser language, the preferred browser language in your content settings. There's a little setting in your browser that's probably...
But even on a different computer. Like, it's not even my computer. It's like she's on a whole different computer, and because she has that set up like that in the IP,
One of the things that I'd like to just talk about a little bit as well is also what's happening with Google's algorithm at the moment. Because obviously a few months ago we had RankBrain brought into it, and that's something that Mike's going to be covering at SMX Munich. Mike, what are your initial thoughts on what's happening with RankBrain at the moment and what we can expect to see in terms of the evolvement of the algorithm because of it?
That's news to me. I didn't know I was covering that in Munich, but I guess I should.
I think it's the Webmaster on the Roof All-Star panel, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Nice.
No, honestly, like, I think the study that Eric Engie did recently is like the most definitive thing that we've seen in the difference of what's been going on. The difficulty that I have with RankBrain is that they're like, oh yeah, all of a sudden we're using machine learning. Like, no, you've always been using machine learning. You're just like repackaging it and making it sound more exciting. So I think the other difficulty is that there's not much we can do about whatever RankBrain is doing, because it's just taking more features and then trying to figure out rankings, in a way that isn't necessarily even understood by Google engineers yet. So I think it's going to be a cool thing to see evolve. But right now, I mean, nobody really has any real answers about what RankBrain is and what it's doing.
Yeah, I mean, surely RankBrain is a combination of different factors if it's machine learning. And as people are saying, oh, RankBrain's going to overtake link building as the most important part of Google's algorithm. But surely RankBrain's a combination of factors. Is that not the case?
Will Critchlow had an interesting post about this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say exactly that. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and it created a lot of controversy, and the comments are actually hilarious to read. But yeah, like you said, that links, the sort of backbone of the algorithm is still going to be there. It's just that RankBrain is a machine learning algo that uses different signals. I mean, I honestly think it's a lot of PR. And RankBrain's
a result. How can you have a result trump authority. I mean, it's I don't know. To me, it seems like a silly concept, but I mean, all it's really done in my eyes right now is get a lot of people to try to start writing one-page answers on their site like crazy. I think the only thing you can really say to yourself if you really want to do anything is if you find you're in a space and you have questions that are being asked regularly in your space, that you create content that answers that question. But that's something we've been recommending people for 10 years.
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I was going to say. True.
That has a problem, answer the problem, right?
Also, featured snippets are different than, potentially different, right, in terms of like rank brain as an algorithm component. But yeah, in terms of featured snippets, which I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, we did. I spoke at SMX Israel about this, and that's a fascinating thing. It's very, for lack of a better term, gameable, right? There's a lot that you can do in terms of reverse engineering how featured snippet works. And right, if you're in an industry that has a lot of informational queries, a lot of informational requests in terms of what your competitors are doing. There's a lot you can do to answer direct questions and use languages and sort of structured language with bullets and so on. Anyways,
that's the problem about not being an SEO is it's very easy to mix up.
Yeah, but but rank brain is all PR. That's my opinion. It's all PR.
No, I agree. I think the really interesting thing about it is that fundamentally what they're trying to do is replicate a quality rater. And I think that Will's point is that once they can replicate a quality rater, well, maybe they don't need links as much. Like, once they can replicate someone actually looking at a site and being like, oh, yeah, this is good and it's about this topic, then we don't necessarily need the whole, page rank thing as much anymore.
Yeah. It'll be interesting, though, because I know that there's just not it's the machines taking over completely, and there's no if-then statements anymore. There's no like human-coded development that goes into understanding quality, which is like Skynet, I guess, a little bit.
So should every business be trying to answer questions and appearing in these direct answers that Google are favoring for many queries at the moment, or is that something that only works for certain types of industries?
Well, how is that different fundamentally from like what we do with search in general? Like having the instant answer means that it gives that sense to the user, like, oh, these are the authority because they have the answer to my question directly at this point in the SERP, which is essentially position 0, right? Like you're above all the other organic results. In some cases, you might be above or below the pay results. So why would they not want to be seen as more authoritative by answering that question? And the other component of it is, a lot of the content that we create in general is supposed to be educational so that you feel like I know enough about the thing that you're trying to buy, whether it's a service or a product. So I think, yeah, every business should be thinking about how can I continue to be that authority and then show up above other people.
I mean, one of the problems is that Google are using this information, this content, displaying it within their search results, and the user sometimes doesn't actually go through to the website. They see the direct answer, they're happy with the direct answer, and they move on.
There's been studies that show that the click-through rate is astronomical.
Way higher.
You have the link.
Way
you have
higher.
a link right below it, and I still, any day of the week, even though Google's scraping my content and serving it to users, even if you're ranked #1, if you're able to get the snippet, you can see that there's forget who did a study on it, but you can Google around and you'll see I think it's very valuable. The question is whether they start removing the link. That'll be that.
I asked Eric if he would release the list of all the ones that he had that didn't have an answer, like all the unresponded ones, and he refuses to release the list because I would have loved to have that kind of information, right? Which ones are not giving an answer, so you can start kind of working on them. I think the biggest thing with that stuff is you have to be careful because we always get caught in that. It was what was it? It was the image carousel that we had to jump in for local listings, and then it was Google authorship, which we were like everybody was. We just have to be careful because Google does a lot of testing. And we can find ourselves really chasing the carrots on the stick, right?
I mean, it reminds me of paid advertising as well, Brad, and that obviously it's possible in Google AdWords to have so many sublinks within an advert as well. Generally, when you offer that, you're probably going to get a higher click-through rate, but will you get a higher purchase link, if purchase rate as well if you do that?
Generally, conversion rates don't change by site links. They usually stay static, and then you just get a better click-through rate. So essentially, you are getting more total conversions. There's some exceptions to that, especially on mobile, but for the most part, conversion rate static in that. Just getting more buyers.
Okay. What about kind of taking out certain links in Webmaster Tools and Search Console? Obviously, you can't select the links that organically appear there, but you can request Google not to have certain links appear there. Does anyone do that on a regular basis for different sites and actually think that they deliver a better user experience by doing that?
Non-SEOs do this, right? Like, I'm not an SEO, I don't claim to be, but yeah, we actually look and say, okay, Google, those are 3 terrible ones you put in there, remove it ourselves, right? Like that. I think the experts here are definitely doing that.
We get clients all the time that are larger brands that even just for not only their own brand search, but if you type like brand plus vertical or whatever, different categories, the sublinks there also can be demoted. So this is a constant maintenance level. There's oftentimes actually, if you have crawling issues from your navigation, that we just kept getting store locations showing up there when you search the brand. And we finally figured out that it had to do with a URL parameter configuration issue in Webmaster Tools. But ultimately, the demoting of those, I think, is a huge value.
Is there what do people look at for metrics to kind of determine that? Is it bounce rate, conversion rate, time? Like, what's the conversions? Any specific metric that you're thinking about?
Go more basic than that. I think we're just talking about when there's a horrible result, like you type a brand and there's a random store location page as opposed to a main vertical, or like just like the terms of service page is showing up there. It's like,
the imprint,
why?
something like that. Yeah. But I would always recommend just doing one by one, because otherwise if you would be demoting 2 at the same time, you would lose that one line in the search results. So always, only do one, wait before another one comes in, and then do the next one. Takes a little bit longer, but if it's not a totally, bad result, I would always do one by one.
Great. Well, look, you guys have shared so much great information so far, but should we maybe start to wrap things up and actually maybe think about just one takeaway for our viewers in terms of what's been discussed so far? What do you think is a good action point for people to take away? And then if you could perhaps just remind people what you're talking about at SMX Munich and just any contact details. So shall we start off with Ari again?
Well, I won't say Reddit because I'm sure other people won't say that. But something I didn't get to mention, I think, is a huge takeaway is how the SERP is changing and how the entire real estate is constantly shifting. And Brad mentioned about everything's an ad. It's just a matter of where it shows up and what the payment structure is. Featured snippets for me is something very new, and although we don't want to game it too much because marketers always ruin everything, there is a lot of tech out there, and again, I spoke about it at SMX Israel. If you Google it, there's a way to use lots of tools to see which of your queries are that are coming into your website don't contain it, and then ones that do where you don't rank, and I think that that's just an awesome opportunity that's underutilized. I'm speaking about something completely different at SMX Munich, But yeah, the ever-changing SERP and chasing the real estate, I think, in all aspects of it is something that I'm really excited about and heard a lot about that today. So.
Great. Okay. And sorry, what's the domain name? What's your website again?
Oh, kahenadigital.com, K-A-H-E-N-A digital.com. But don't go there. It's a horrible site.
And also Bastian.
I would say probably for me the biggest thing right now really is speed. So speed really matters on each and every device. I'm a really impatient guy, and I hate waiting, especially as the guy said, like especially if you travel and if you're on slow mobile connections, it's a pain to wait for something that you want to look up quickly. So for me, and that's not really core kind of an SEO issue, but rather more kind of a user experience kind of thing. So yeah, and not necessarily AMP or AMP. I'm not a big fan of that, honestly, but speed in general, make sites fast. That's probably the key thing, and it helps in rankings as well. Yeah.
And is that what you're going to be talking about as well?
I did last year, so so this year I'm gonna leave it over to Cindy Crum, who's obviously also very good in site speed kind of things. Last year we shared the stage. This year I'm gonna do, as I said, like a bit of crawl budget and indexation kind of thing, because I think that's the second biggest thing for me right now. Proper indexation management and those pages being crawled that really matter. So yeah, this is gonna be my stuff for next week.
Wonderful. And in terms of finding more about you, it's peakace.de, isn't it?
Yes.
Great stuff. And also with us today was Brad.
Yeah, so I would say focus on the fact that everything is an ad, right? Everything you're doing, doesn't matter if it's organic, an email, social, whatever, it is an ad designed to have a user do some action, whether it's read content, interact with content, buy something. Everything's an ad, and no matter how you get there, you have to think of what's the end result of the user experience, which is why I'm in SMX. I'm doing a full-day workshop on AdWords, and then one talk on enterprise, but enterprise from the ad standpoint, and another one on ads beyond keywords. In the end, users don't care about the technical stuff. They don't care about your bids if you're paid, right? They don't care about any of that, right? The users only care about what ad do I see and what's the content I interact with. Everything else is for us, right? It's not for them.
Great thoughts. And in terms of getting hold of you, Brad, is bgtheory.com the best place to go?
No, that's the holding company. So BG Theory is my Twitter handle where I hang out a lot, but adalisis.com would be the easiest place to find us.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thanks for joining us. And also with us today was Brent.
Hi. Yeah, the biggest takeaway I have, from all of this, I mean, it was kind of mentioned a couple different times through the conversation, is to really focus on having a strategy and really like thinking before you do things. We see this across the board in social, SEO, and everything. It's just there's this sense of I need to do everything, and I think we really are at a point right now where we need to focus more on like what we actually think works. And has a return, and focus energy around amplifying return instead of spending energy, 100% energy experimenting. So I think with all of these things, it's just sitting back and kind of thinking about how it works for you. And that's one of the things when I'm speaking about Reddit, and one of the things that I always say is that no site is the best site for everyone. Like you have to pick and choose your angle, and so. That's it. And again, where I'm from, Pixel Road Designs and Search Engine Journal.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks, Brent. And also with us was Owen.
Yeah, well, I loved everything we talked about today, so thanks for that, guys.
Thanks for joining.
I'm very passionate about international strategies and SEO, also in paid search, so I'd be happy to follow up on that in the future. And I'll be talking about hreflang annotations at SMX next week.
Lovely. And so what's your website again, Owen?
My company's website is rankingcheck.de, but as that's entirely in German, I would recommend you visit my blog, rebelytics.com, where you can read my stuff in English.
Wonderful. And also with us is Martin.
So yeah, I think Brett and Brent mentioned it both. Like it all depends on what is the goal that you in the end want to achieve. Like why do you do certain things and on which channels do you do that? So for example, Reddit we discussed quite a lot. Like only go under if it's genuine. Like really think what do you want to achieve and how do you get there? And yeah, in the end try to be genuine as the brand as well, because I think that's going to be the main focus also in my talk. That's what I will be focusing on. So like what can we sort of learn from each other, so from the SEO point of view and the PRs, and how can we bring that together. And yeah, you can find us on stylight.com. So
lovely.
That should be it.
Thank you, Martin. And also thanks for getting up very early, Mr. Mike King.
I'm on the road. I've got to make it happen. So, I mean, I agree with Bastian. I'm very much about speed right now as well, primarily optimizing for the critical rendering path. But one of my bigger takeaways is that, we as an SEO industry, or the SEO industry rather, have kind of gotten away from the whole like testing and learning and making our own stuff. culture. And I think we need to get back to that because, like I said before, a lot of our SEO tools just aren't cutting it, and they're very much behind what search engines are able to do. And, you know, one of the things I really harp on in my talk is how we can, you know, get back to creating small tools for ourselves that are going to help us do the technical things that we need to do at this point.
In terms of getting hold of you, yeah.
Yeah, iPullRank.com.
Superb. And sorry, you were also going to say what you were talking about as well, weren't you, Mike?
No, I was going to say where to find me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to have everyone on. And I'm David Bain, Head of Growth at Authoritas.com, actionable big data for enterprise content marketing. And you can also find me interviewing online marketing gurus over at digitalmarketingradio.com. Now, if you're watching this show as a recording, remember to watch the next show live. So head over to thisweekinorganic.com and be part of the live audience for the next show. But for those of you watching live, we also have an audio podcast of previous shows. So again, sign up to email updates at thisweekinorganic.com and you'll receive a link to the podcast from there too. But until we see you again, have a fantabulous weekend. Have a great time at SMX Munich next week. And thank you all for joining us. Cheers, everyone. Thank you for being a part of it.
See ya.
Bye.
Cheers.